One of the things we've talked about, President Trump, on this podcast a lot is the deficit. Under your administration, we added close to $8 trillion. Under Biden, it's going to be paradoxically about the same number. Seems incredibly unpopular in Washington to cut costs, but that's something we're going to need to do. What's your plan? And it looks like you're going to win a second term here. What's your plan in your second term to control spending? Can you get it under control? Is there the will in Washington to allow you to do that?
Well, the biggest thing I think is growth, because we can grow our way out. As an example, we have more liquid gold under our feet. I use the term. We have more oil. We have more wells. We have more everything than anybody else. When I started, we were number 3. Now we're number 1. We were number 1. He's going to keep it that way until after the election. If they ever won the election, there's no more oil coming out. There's no more oil. They were going down. Oil is what caused the inflation. You'd have nothing coming out. It would be a disaster. So they were intelligent enough to let the oil wells continue to go. They're not happy about it. But if this election were won by them, I can tell you right now, we would see oil go through the roof because they would really close it up. Already they're taking out of the strategic reserves just for politics because they want to try and keep the prices down as low as possible. But the big thing, we have tremendous growth potential and we have tremendous numbers of dollars that can be saved through efficiency. The way we're spending money, hundreds of billions of dollars, what Biden did with the trillions of dollars that he borrowed for COVID. Now, I had a different situation. We were getting ready to start paying off debt. We were getting ready to make a lot. We had the greatest economy in history. I had to throw a lot of money at COVID in order that we didn't end up in a 1929 type depression, which we could still end up in now because of what they've done. But I threw a lot of money in, and we ended up not in a depression. And then we ended up with a very strong, I ended up with a higher stock market than it was just previous to COVID coming in, which was pretty much of a miracle, according to most. But we had to throw money out there in order to keep our country going. We would have ended up, if I didn't do that, we would have ended up in a depression. The problem is, when Biden came in, he took trillions and trillions of dollars for COVID. He didn't use it for COVID. He used it for other things. But he took trillions of dollars out, and that caused a lot of the inflation. His energy policies caused inflation, and his spending, the unbelievable spending that they did caused inflation, tremendous inflation, and it's going to have an impact for a long time to come.
Can you talk about your impoundment authority intention? You mentioned that in the past, that you could go in and reduce the bureaucracy and the spend. I always tell people my position going into the election is less that I'm interested in knowing what the government's going to do for me, and I'm more interested in knowing what the government's going to stop doing that doesn't do any good for anyone. And there seems to be a lot of that. And I'm really curious to hear, sir, how you think about using the impoundment authority vested in you as the president of the United States to reduce some of the bureaucracy, wasteful spending, and create accountability. And is there a team that you've built around you to help build a specific plan on backing out of some of these issues?
Right. We have a lot of money floating around that should be brought back into the government, should be given back to D.C., to Washington. As you know, there was a lot of money given out over the last couple of years, especially my money was given out to help us with COVID. Then they took money and they have no idea what they're even doing with it. That money can be given back, and it should be given back, and things can be done with that money that are positive. But there are many, many things. I'll give you an example. Education. We spend more on education per pupil than any other country. We spend numbers and yet we're terrible at it. We're down at the bottom of the list, and yet we're at the top of the list. I am going to, very early in the administration, we're going to send education back to the states. We're going to give them approximately half the number of dollars, and they're going to have so much money that like they've never had before, because they can spend a fraction of what we're spending right now and have much better school systems. As an example, you could name many. You go to Nebraska, you go to Iowa, you go to many states. We'll do a far better job than we're doing right now, and they'll do it for a fraction of the cost. We'll save a tremendous amount of money and have better. Some states, I don't believe, will do a very good job, but they're going to have to learn to. But we have, I would say most of our states will do a much better job. I think all of them will do better than, you can't do worse than what we're doing right now, but all of them will do better. But some will be absolutely education, a factory in a positive sense, factories. we are going to close up education. We'll have a tiny little group to make sure everyone's teaching at least English and perhaps proper math, et cetera, but very little. Department of Education goes, and education goes back to the states and where it belongs. I mean, where it absolutely belongs. And you're going to save a lot of money. You can look at interior with that. You can look at environmental with a lot of that, where the environment can be controlled by the states instead of this big bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. I mean, what do you do when China is burning all the coal and they're sending the ashes over the United States? Because that's what happens. It takes 3.5 days and it blows over the United States. In the meantime, we're keeping things good. We produce clean coal. We're going to produce clean energy, but we have to get back to energy. We're spending trillions of dollars on artificial, weak energy that's not going to fire up our plants. Our plants have to be fired up. We have a phenomena coming up right now, and I was talking about it the other day to David, and that's AI, little things, two little simple letters, but it's big. And I realized the other day, more than any time when we were at David's house and talking to a lot of geniuses from Silicon Valley and other places, they need electricity at levels that nobody's ever experienced before to be successful, to be a leader in AI. The amount of electricity they need is like double what we have right now and even triple what we have right now. It's incredible how much they need to be the leader. And we're going to have to be able to do that. And a windmill turning with its blade, knocking out the birds and everything else is not going to be able to make us competitive. You'll have China.
What about nuclear, Mr. President? Yeah. So let me just give you a statistic on this.
Nuclear is
China's
okay.
building 150 nuclear reactors, and they're only spending about $2,500 a kilowatt. In the U.S., we're not building any, and our cost to build them is about $10,000 a kilowatt. And China's about to build as much capacity as 20% of the total U.S. production in nuclear. We clearly have a problem here in nuclear.
We do, and nuclear is okay with me. And what we're doing is, you know, if you look at Alabama, you look at a couple of states where they built these plants and they had cost overruns that are, nobody's ever seen anything like it, where they're costing $25 billion to build a plant. There were a couple of them built in the South. I won't mention the places, but you know the places. And they came out at numbers that I think the most expensive things ever built in our country. And the inspectors would go in, they say, those walls aren't thick enough, knock them down and build another wall. And, you know, the environmental people were brutal. You know, in France and in other places where they do have a lot of nuclear, they build small plants all the same. And if they need double the amount, they'll build two of them, as opposed to the nonsense that we've done where we build these massive plants and they never get built and they have cost overruns of 300, 400, 500%. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. No, I'm okay with nuclear, but you have to do it in a way that makes sense. And they have nuclear applications today that can be built and can be built reasonably inexpensively. But nuclear certainly is very strong power.